The first thing I think about when I have to start gutting a deer, usually you have to cut your tag first, or mark that you've had a successful harvest. The next thing I do is I get kind of organized here. There's a couple things I'm getting organized for. One is make sure you put all your stuff in one spot, because generally speaking, after you've killed an animal, you're going to be kind of excited and you're going to end up spreading all your stuff all over the place. So I have one spot where I'm putting all my expensive binoculars and iPhones and radios and guns and whatnot. So Alex shot this deer in the neck, and so it actually bled out considerably. He would have hit one of the main arteries there, so that's great. If you hit the neck or in the head and you hit the spine and it doesn't bleed out, then the first thing you may want to do is cut the throat, and in order for the blood to drain out of the animal. Now most of the time I shoot deer in the chest here. And if you shoot them in the chest, you're going to hit the heart and lungs, and they're going to bleed out right away. So, okay, so the first step that in gutting a deer is that you have to go back to its bum here, and you're going to basically get a hold of its asshole and carefully cut around its anus. And basically, what you're trying to do is you're trying to cut up around the outside of the rectum. Which is basically you're contouring the inside of the pelvis bone. Okay, so I'm just going to reach in here and I'm going to grab a hold of its poop chute, because you want to add a little bit of tension to it. It'll make it a lot easier to cut. And get a hold of it, and then I'm going to stick my knife just on the outside of it. And I'm going to cut around the outside of his little poop chute. And so I've got all the way around the outside of the skin, and so you can start to see that that's sort of his rectum there that I got a hold of. Now what I do is I get a hold of it, and I'm going to slide the knife up, and you can find basically the inside of that pelvis bone. You're sort of cutting up against that pelvis bone all the way around. Anyway, they got a hold of his rectum. I'm going to go all the way around it, cutting as deep as I can. Okay, and that should be pretty good. Great. Okay, so there's only a couple of places where the guts are actually attached to the cavity. One is which is inside the rectum here, inside the pelvis on the inside. The other spot is going to be right up around the diaphragm. So our next cut is to dive into his belly. Now we want to be really careful not to puncture his stomach lining. So we have to cut through the muscle tissue and the hide along his belly here, but not so far that we go right into the stomach liner. Okay, so how I do this is I just go ahead and I just pick a piece of, I just take a little bit of, pull up a little bit of hide like this. I always protect the point with my finger, just so that I'm not diving that point too far into his belly. And I'm just going to make a little incision right there, which is going to get me started. It's going to get me through the hide, and then there, it's going to get me through the hide right there. So now I'm through the hide, and I can see the stomach wall there. Oh, I'm going to go a little bit deeper actually. So I'm going to pick a little bit further. There we go. Now I got it. So you can just see that that's a little bit of that's his stomach there that's pushing through, and then this here is the hide, and then the muscle tissue holding his stomach. So we're trying to get the knife to cut just that skin and the muscle tissue. So how I'm going to do that, I'm going to move over a little bit, and I'm going to run the knife underneath his hide and up like that. Go all the way to there we go. I'm going to go back a little bit here too, right up next to his penis and testicles. Now I'm going to leave these on here because in British Columbia we need to leave evidence of sex. So you got to leave at least one testicle or a piece of the penis in order to demonstrate that it's a buck. Okay, so you can see already that this is already sort of trying to jump out on me here. What I normally do is I try to point the animal just so that it's pointing downhill, so I got the help of gravity to drain him out. So if I reach in here, I should be able to kind of reach back down into his butt cavity there and grab his, that's basically his, that's what we were cutting around when we went in from his ass. We went around the outside of that. So you can see it there, and then you can see his little butthole there. So that, you just reach in there and grab it, comes out. Now if you had a full bladder, you'd have to be careful to pull that out as well. And you should be able to see that here somewhere. There's his bladder there. So sometimes it's full, you gotta just carefully lift it out. All right, so most of the guts are already out, eh? So the next thing I'm gonna do, always be careful about where you put your knife, because you put your knife down a million times. I usually have sort of a spot I like to leave it, so I leave it in the same spot every time. All right, so I'm gonna feel up here, and I should be able to feel his diaphragm. It's a smooth muscle that basically isolates his chest cavity, where his heart and lungs are, from his gut cavity, where, well, his guts are. So you can feel it with your hand. So I'm gonna kind of landmark it with my hand, and then I'm gonna reach in here with my knife, and I'm gonna just sort of cut all the way around the edge of it. And as I go around the edge of it, I'm gonna wind up cutting free his, you can kind of get right in here and have a look. So I've cut the diaphragm up here, and I'm going to cut down the bottom of it down here, and all this should come away with it. Okay, you can see there's his lungs in here, and that's the diaphragm separating that, and it comes right across here. So because he got shot in the neck, there's a bunch of blood drained back down his esophagus into his chest cavity. Get the rest of that diaphragm here. And you can kind of feel with your hands where those guts are still attached, and then you just cut them away like that. Now that's the liver right there. Now since this is a lovely little spike buck, and it's Alex's first deer, we're gonna take this back to camp and certainly have a little bit of liver, because you're supposed to do that. Just leave it somewhere nice and clean. That nice clean rock's perfectly fine. Then just because I can, I'm just gonna roll these guts sort of downhill and out of the way, so that this stuff's neat here. This is a big fat lining, and my butcher buddy says I should try and keep it. You can roll roast in it because it's actually a really high quality fat. Anyways, okay, so if you've shot this guy in the chest, or in this case in the neck here, he's going to be full of blood. In this case, he is full of blood, coagulated blood. Okay, put your knife back in the same spot. Now, there's a couple ways of doing this. What you can do, you can just kind of turn him over, and then just sort of point him downhill and get some of that blood out of him there. I still got some work to do here. I just want to get that sort of out of the picture. Okay, I'm just going to slide him up a couple feet now. Last thing you got to do before he's ready to take off the mountain here, I'm going to reach into his guts, and I'm going to reach up past his heart and lungs, and I'm going to find his esophagus, which is that tube that kind of between his heart and lungs. And I'm going to the tube that runs from his throat to his heart and lungs. I'm going to reach in again. Be very careful not to cut yourself here. I'm going to reach in, and I'm going to reach all the way to the top, as far up that esophagus as I can. Hang on to it, because it's really rubbery. If you don't hang on to it, you won't be able to cut it. It'll just bounce around. And if you got it right, you should be able to pull out. Here we go, heart and lungs. So if you look here, this is the esophagus. It's like it's a tube. And then you can see his lungs here. Now this guy, his lungs are in good shape because it wasn't a lung shot. And if you dig around in here, you'll also find the heart. And open that up. There's the beautiful little heart. And again, this is something we'll take with us because it's good to eat. Carefully cut it away from the lungs. And again, just put it somewhere to drain out. All right, so that's it. That's everything out of here. You can just remove any bits of blood that are left, and That'll definitely happen as you're towing it downhill. I run my finger up the outside of his leg, up to the top of the first bump, and I cut right across the top of the first bump. And if you get it right, it should just pop right off. And you can do this on a moose or an elk. It's really, so you don't need a saw. Again, I just try to minimize the exposure of meat. So I'm only really cutting a hole here that's, maybe 18 inches at the most to remove the guts. When I get back to back to camp or home where I can control the environment, I mean, that's when I'll skin it out and open them right up and keep them nice and clean. But for now, I want minimum exposure to the environment if I can. So yeah, since I did all the work for Alex, he's gonna have to tow this by himself back to camp.